in person in a while. Just maybe we could just do a quick round of introductions. I'm Dana Townsend. I'm the Deputy County Manager for Community Services for Bernalillo County and former ABC Director. I'm standing in here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Baca, elected County Commissioner of District 2, South Valley, Southwest Mason, lifelong resident of the district.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Rich. I'm the Dean of UNM's College of Education and Sciences.
Good morning, I'm Katarina Samalan, I go by Kata. I'm the Youth and Family Services Director here at the city, which encompasses our community centers, our early childhood centers, crossing guards and education.
Good morning, everybody. Counselor Nicole Rogers, District 6, which is Lomas is the northern boundary all the way to I-25, all the way up to Mesa del Sol.
Good morning, Brooke Bassan, District 4, the northeast heights of Albuquerque.
Barbara Peterson. I started as an APS board member, but now I'm a community person. And I'm the president of the AFTNM retiree group.
And Superintendent Blakey is online, although her camera's not on, so I'm not sure. Oh, there she is, yay.
Hi, I'm Gabriella Blakey. Sorry, I'm the superintendent in APS. I apologize, I can't be there. I had a back-to-back meeting. So sorry.
We're watching for you, so any comments you have, you just chime right in. Okay.
Good morning, Dr. Blakely. My name is Ruben Garcia. I have a company called JB Media Group. We just changed our name. I am here representing Albuquerque Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I sit on their executive committee also. So,
hi, Ellen Bernstein, Albuquerque Teachers Federation. It's kind of fun to see what everybody looks like from the next day.
Welcome. I also want to specifically welcome Ruben for the first meeting. I've heard amazing things about you, so I'm excited that you are joining the ABC Partnership Board. We're going to go ahead and get started with announcements for our board members. First announcement that I would like to make is our very own Deanna Creighton has been selected for.
She made me put this on.
I did make it there because both across the state and across the country, and the partnership board really makes that possible with the investments that they make from each of the big entities for sure. And this is an international conference and thus an international award for the work that Deanna has done to move the field forward. And obviously not alone. Many of you in this room have helped ABC with that, but it's been a long road. So yay.
Good job, Deanna. That's the secret. You just gotta outlast.
Also because I am not actually going to the conference, I'm not gonna get to see her get that award in person. So I want to make sure everyone here saw her get that award.
Yay.
And the next announcement, am I reading this one? Sorry, it's just.
Oh, yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
Well, or yeah,
Go ahead.
we need the next slide though, Chloe. Okay, where Chloe is managing from home. Welcome back, Chloe, as well. Hey, oh, but I missed her. We should have said this. So Chloe had a very adorable baby a few months ago, and so she is at home running all of our slide deck for us. So yeah, we're excited about this. So the National American Federation of Teachers reached out and invited a whole lot of us to the community school intensive that happens right before this conference in Minneapolis that Danette was talking about. And so we were really excited that they have, that we've been able to leverage some funding to include some board representatives. So actually board member Josefina Dominguez will be there. One of the faculty in Chris's department will be there. And we have members of our local union, the county, the ABC staff will be there, and some teachers who participated in the Lead and Learn. So it's a really, Brian will be there and Dr. Salazar will be there. And is anybody else leadership wise? Brian. Brian Laurent, right, yeah, sorry, it's a very long list of people. We actually had to ask for an exception to bring extra people, and then like, I'll go to Albuquerque, of course. Yeah,
And also, I think critical National AFT is also covering the expense of
Yeah.
doing that, which is also a testament to the work that the ABC team, this community school innovation team has done in partnership with Brian and Brian.
That's a show.
And Sonia, yeah, and Sonia with an APS, they are so intrigued and impressed by the work that we move forward, particularly as a collaborative, that they're willing to cover the costs, and that's not cheap to send a team like that to a 2-day intensive, so congratulations.
So I just want to double down on what you said. In the AFT national world, the work of ABC Community School Partnership is an exemplar that they use for all their other locals, and it's, so you all are famous.
Well, and in fact, we did just host a group from Wichita through AFT National. They suggested that they come to Albuquerque. So yeah, thank you for reminding us of that.
Thank you. We also want to thank Ruben Kata and APS leadership for their support of the community school innovation
Look, I even have,
practicum
thank you.
last week,
Thank you.
which I have heard was amazing.
We have some pictures.
We engaged, excellent, we engaged teams, including principals from 20 community schools identified as priority schools in APS, and anybody that would like to share some feedback.
And I can give you a little more context on this too, since we did talk about this in February and March. And we have Brian Garcia here as well, and Brian Laurent, who also were both part of this. But I love this picture of Ruben. So Ruben he's just been such a supportive new board member. So he brought one of his Johnny boards. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we set up digital displays around the city. We work with the city and the county, doing public service work. And we're starting to do statewide work. So we're putting digital boards in high schools and middle schools. So whenever we have an opportunity, we try to bring one and kind of showcase what we do and some of the public service. So we had the 988 number running, and stay in school campaigns are running with the state.
We put our agenda on it.
Yeah.
We looked very fancy and
Yeah.
high tech, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for
Yeah,
that. And
yes.
he attended, and Katza also stopped by and said hello. We were very lucky to have Dr. Gonzalez representing the superintendent, gave a really lovely opening remarks. Dr. Salazar ran a whole section of the workshop around the APS strategic priorities, the goals and guardrails, the promising practices. And Brian and I co-facilitated. It was 2 days. And can you give us some context on what the priority schools are exactly?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, member of the board, Dr. Blakey. Really appreciated this opportunity in the sense that this really came together in alignment to the systems of support that have been established within the APS world to support our schools that are in the greatest need of support. And so really being able to, in this particular arena, bring together a collaborative approach. In many respects, we've generally had trainings that really focus on the principal and the coordinator working together, which we always have felt is critically important. But in this particular practicum, we brought together the other support positions that will be housed in priority schools, ranging from the teaching and learning coach, as well as the student success systems resource teacher. And so really bringing coherence to this work, I think was really helpful, and making sure one of the ahas was really seeing that it's not incumbent only upon the coordinator and the principal to engage and lift up the strategy, but it really is a collaborative leadership approach. And our other role groups, including our family liaisons, which are critical to this work, I think we're really immersed and really saw how all the APS priorities, their goals, the guardrails, the things that Deanna mentioned, are really coming together and are underpinned by the foundation of the community school strategy. So thank you, Deanna, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the comment.
And Brian and Deanna and I were meeting with all the community school coordinators, and the ones that were able to attend, felt like they really had an understanding of how to move forward. That was my impression listening. And the opportunity for everybody else is gonna be crucial.
And that's a great segue to our next slide, so we did this in partnership with Binghamton University. They're part of SUNY out of New York. I ran into them last fall when I was at the University of Pennsylvania. I was asked to be a presenter there, and I went to one of their workshops, and they were like, "Hi, we're 3 community school professors at the University of at Binghamton University, and we are researchers in community schools." And I was like, "What?" So I connected up with them. So we partnered with them in the design of the practicum. And so we were really thrilled to have their thought partnering on this. So they conducted an evaluation for us. We're still gathering. It was only last week, so this is preliminary. But so far, out of approximately 50% of the attendees who have responded, 90% have said they were satisfied across all the questions we asked around the structure and the learning content. 93% felt supported across all of the items, and that includes those practices and everything that Brian was describing, as well as the community school framework. You can see some quotes there, that it was informative, networking opportunities. I wish I could have, there were lots of really positive comments. And you can see some growth. The blue is before, as far as their understanding of how all of these, to your comment, of how all of these components fit together, and then the orange is after. So there is pretty significant growth in understanding the fundamentals, understanding the role groups, and then understanding data collection and using the community school transformation strategy in their confidence in doing that. So yeah, we definitely I felt it went amazingly well, like way better than I even thought. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Katza, as far as just you were visiting for a little while, or?
It was great to see, noticing that there was everyone from district leadership to the folks who do the work every day. Together talking about the work. So that was great to see.
And it was a pretty packed room, as you can see. We were also very cozy in that space, but we thought it went well. That it was nice. People really got a chance to talk and share, and we were excited to welcome a pretty large group from APS EdTech, who are what do they do exactly?
They're going to specialize in moving forward in reference to adult learning. And so really being able to assist those 3 positions I mentioned in the through lines to adult learning, knowing there's 7 generations in the workplace now. And how we all work together and how we tailor the adult learning to maximize and get those kinds of results that you see on the screen.
And I want to mention also, thank you to Brian Laurent he gave a portion of the practicum workshop as well, around how the community school strategy and the 90-day plan really align and work together. Well, the 90-day plan, you're going to hear a little bit more about that from Brian later on. So, but it is like how school improvement and community school framework really support one another. So, any other? We are hoping, so since this was only for, I think it's 25 actually, we opened it up to 25 priority schools. Some of those are brand new. So like, don't even have a community school coordinator yet, or, so some weren't able to attend. But we're hoping to potentially replicate this for the rest of the community schools who didn't get a chance to attend. We've lots of great learning that came from it, for us at least, and I think for the participants. All right, back to you. Yes, we do have a form.
All right, so thank you. That sounds incredible. The next on our agenda is to approve the agenda. And I need a motion for that, please, if I could. Motion to approve. Second. Second. Thank you. And then the motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Second. Maybe I should take a vote on that first one, sorry. Used to just sitting in front of people. Back up on that. Can I get all in favor of approving the agenda, please? Yes. Any opposed? In favor of approving the minute? Yes. Any opposed? Thank you. There are no new business items this morning, so we will jump right into our first a highlight of what community schools do, reducing chronic absenteeism. And I believe that this is Brian, right?
No, it's,
Oh, this is you, sorry.
yeah. Yeah, it was us together.
90-day plan, Brian.
Yeah, so I'll stand.
Brian Garcia is
I'll
doing this one.
I know, there's so many, right? So this was really driven actually by some excitement around chronic absenteeism data from you, Commissioner Baca. And also board member Josefina Dominguez expressed interest in seeing like, what is it exactly that community schools do in order to, like it first in general, but are there specific data and outcomes that we are tracking? So one of the things that we talked about in the practicum is actually what outcomes we are looking for when we implement the community school strategy and how those outcomes align directly with APS's goals and guardrails and strategic plan and priorities. And so as we were digging into all of this in preparation and in response to your request, we asked the APS SAPR team to pull the data around all of the chronic absenteeism and compare non-community schools and community schools. So you can go to the next slide, Chloe. So the problem that we were looking at is chronic absenteeism. So what you see on here is just the national, and I'm going to show you our district level data in a moment, but 28% is the highest, and it increased obviously during COVID. And there are consequences for students who are experiencing chronic absenteeism, right? Like, obviously, they're more likely to fall behind academically, but also socially, and to feel more disconnected from their schools. And often they will drop out of school because of that disconnection and that challenge academically. And so one of the things that community schools try really hard to look at is the root cause. So what is behind the data that we are seeing? And what can we as a whole community do about that, right? The tenet of community schools is that the responsibility for helping our students lead successful lives is that it falls on all of us. It's not just the principal, it's not just the teacher, it's not the community school coordinator or the family liaison. We all have a responsibility for helping our students be successful. There is actually research, and you do have a one-pager in your packet that I'll run through slightly in a condensed form. But the Learning Policy Institute pulled together some research across the country, and most of the findings that they share there are from California. So we pulled together our own little highlights. That's the cards that are in your packet as well for local community schools. But they really looked at this problem of chronic absenteeism and community school strategy, and how does one inform the other, and what do community schools in particular do? So what they show is that when implemented effectively, one of the things that the community school strategy does is reduce chronic absenteeism. And there are certain things that community schools do that maybe traditional schools do. We don't know. Our data is about community schools, and that's where our research sits. But they have a really comprehensive approach. If there is a strong focus in that school on reducing chronic absenteeism, there are, according to the research, 6 things that these community schools do. So they, actually, I won't read them here because I'm going to show them to you in just a second. But one of the 6 effective elements of reducing chronic absenteeism is the position of the community school coordinator, which in APS, we are shifting just a tiny bit on that job title to community school impact coordinator, because we do really feel strongly that their job is to help bring about and then reflect back the impact that the community school strategy is having. So if you go to the next slide. So coordinators are just a key element. So the effective elements that they identified, these are 5 of the 6. As I said, the 6th is the community school coordinator. But improving family engagement, which is something community schools already do anyway, right? But in this case, and in some of the highlights that we've seen throughout our community schools, and I see there are school impact coordinators here today, so thank you. We have seen though that where there was a very strong emphasis on not just increasing family engagement, but like shifting the way that families were engaged, and it went deeper, and they actually in some schools they brought these data around absenteeism to families and said, we're concerned about this. Are you concerned about this? And they really embodied what I said earlier around, this is a collective problem that we are trying to solve. We want your students here. And so what can we do to help you get them here? And they listened to what families were saying were their challenges, and they adapted and they changed. In some cases, they tried to change just even how they were approaching absenteeism in general, rather than a punitive communication to the family. It was a supportive communication. Hey, we really missed so-and-so, and it was every single day in some cases.
I just want to say how important that is
Mhm.
from my perspective, because a lot of times, you know, at the state level, in particular, looking at the attendance problem, the policies that come up are all punitive. Like, you know, we're gonna, give you a ticket or haul you off if you don't get your kids to school. And I've always thought it's about figuring out why and then offering support. And that is the key to ensuring that kids are able to get to school. So this, to me, shifts that narrative in such an important way. And the relationship with the community school coordinator, so important.
Yeah, and other roles, right? Other key roles. This is the schools that I know of who did a very specific effort in family engagement around absenteeism. It was a whole school effort, school-wide, teachers, everybody.
Yeah, and I think just hearing Dr. Bernstein talk about sort of the impact and the effect that this all has in terms of the narrative, really getting a sense of, in the spirit of alignment and leveraging, seeing that those points that you see on the screen are not in isolation. In reference to our councils taking on the engagement of their stakeholders in attendance, really seeing how our skills, habits, and mindsets work really helps impact that connectedness and that goal setting for our students. There's really these 4 things, and there's 6. I know you'll get to the next slide, really seeing how they all work together.
Right.
Ranging from data systems to that human element to really that parent engagement work that comes together. So
Yeah, and I don't know that these are in any particular
Right,
order,
yeah.
but that is a good point in that this is a framework and that the strategies are connected, and it is the role of a community school impact coordinator to connect those things in the school. And that includes pulling the data, looking at the data, sharing the data, keeping on top of it so that they can then show outcomes, which is the third one
Sounds
there.
like in order for this to be successful in these 6 ways too, though, that there has to be a lot of transparency and open communication and creating the stage for people to be at the table in the
Right.
first place from that school-wide. Because all of these things are things that every school probably does in
Right.
some way, shape, or form, right?
Yep, and I think you're right, and there is already a tiered system of attendance, right? There are attendance teams, and so again, community school. And so I encourage you, if you're curious about, I'm gonna show you the overall data, but if you're curious about like, what exactly did this specific school do around this? Please let us know, and we will reach out and pull specific. I gave you a couple of highlights that we have from some schools. I would really love to have highlights from especially some of these really schools that showed really significant results, drops in their chronic absenteeism.
And then is there an opportunity for everybody to share these strategies? So, because I think that's one of the most important things. You know, teachers are told, call,
Yeah, right.
and it's like, okay, I don't know when, but I'll try. So this becomes more of a team effort, but then sharing the successes with all schools, community schools and not community schools, I think is really important to have that supportive attitude, find out what works and share it.
So I want to say that, yes, we do give venues for community school coordinators to have peer learning on best practices in our huddle spaces. And I think we did one around this specifically, and if not in the huddle, then in the cohort spaces for sure. But we could probably do even more of that. Yeah, I think we could definitely. And we have, you know, a super cool project with the full service community schools grant and the all hands in project, where that is a feeder pattern that is really looking very deeply at data. Chronic absenteeism is one of the federal goals for that grant. And so they have very specific, and there's lots and lots of sharing opportunities there that we hope to replicate as well in feeder patterns.
And sharing with principals, right? Like a 90-day plan connection
Yeah, that one's a little harder for us, but yes, I think,
That's why I looked at Brian.
right?
Your sites.
And I think one of the things that's important about the community schools is it's not one isolated thing that makes kids come to school or not come to school. And so like looking at just what does it mean? The idea of rigorous community connected classroom instruction. It's like what's compelling kids to come to school.
Come to school.
How do parents feel when they walk in the door, and the difference of the whole structure and culture of a school really impacts.
Yes.
And so I think that's really important to include in the narrative, along with here are some specific things we did, because I was driving down listening to KUNM and they had a call in.
PSA on KUNM. Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the solutions that the host summed up was, well, incentives are really good. And I thought, you know, they might work for one isolated school year with a whole lot, but it doesn't make kids come back the next year.
Yeah.
If that's what you're doing, if you don't look at what's the culture of the school. So the data is great, but the narrative, I think, needs to be much more expansive in what it means to be a community school.
And I think Commissioner Baca, that's kind of what you were getting at too, right? When you asked that question about level, are all of our schools doing these things, right? We're seeing highlights. And so how do we translate that? So we are working on, Ruben has connected me with somebody who might be able to help us do a better job at telling our narrative.
I wanna, it's not just the school culture, it's our culture. I was in a conversation with, I don't know, some kind of national conversation with different people. And one of the presentations had to do with absenteeism, and one of the comments from one of the national presenters was something, I wish I could say it the way they said it. Because of COVID, not going to school became okay. There's this whole community shift around the thinking about mandatory school attendance. And we need to understand that if we're gonna really change it.
Well, and part of that story to tell is not that you have to go to school, it's why you want to go to school. And understanding that, you know, if we're hardwired for human connection and we know that there is research coming out of COVID that says that people are lonely and they feel isolated even when they're with other people, that's not going to be any different for young people. And coming to school is that place where they get connected, because we know they can learn math regardless of where they sit. It's just a matter of how well that integrates and what we are building, you know, in our human connection. And so that shifts that sort of narrative of like, I know I can do math without being in the classroom, but why should I be in the classroom? And I think community schools are just positioned so well to bring so many people to the table, and not that other schools don't do good work. Community schools are just positioned, particularly because of the role of the impact coordinator, to ensure that every single part of the school understands what the rest of the school is doing and how they do it together to create that space.
Yeah, and I think this has implications also, like Dean Goodrich, looking at you, you know, for principals as they are coming through your program, for teachers, school counselors, that this, and that is, you know, tying it back to the practicum that we talked about earlier. When we had those folks, we didn't have school counselors, but these other roles in that space all together, lots of ideas were sparking and flying. And we did a whole session on relationships and how important that is as a team, and then how that needs to spread out to the school.
I'll prompt our superintendent, Dr. Blakey.
Thank you, Brian. I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. The icons are all different. I just wanted to add that, you know, I really appreciate the work of the community on this, because I feel like, you know, our educators are there during the day and they are providing the instruction, but we've been able to pull some data that shows the difference between students who are at school, who have a higher attendance rate, and what their outcomes are compared to students who are absent, which obviously, I mean, we kind of assumed that, but being able to really look at those data was really important to us knowing that often we are held accountable for data of students who aren't at school. So it's obviously hard to teach them. And there's a like misconception that attendance is what we would think of as like high school kids ditching, right? Like the other day I was just telling somebody that I had one of my neighbors like came to my house at like 7 o'clock at night to tell me that at 9 o'clock in the morning, I live next to a high school. There's kids from the park that are at the park and that I should go check on them. I was like, okay, but we have 70,000 kids. So I'm not going to leave work to go find the two kids at the park. But when he said that, I was just thinking about how the community really can come together to address when kids aren't at school. But it's really not just like the high school kids, I think, is where we can address the sense of belonging, wanting to be there, engaging them in the schoolwork because they're a little bit more self-sufficient to get to school. Our elementary students, honestly, like they want, when we talk to them and they're absent, they want to go to school, but they are in conditions where their parents aren't taking them. Their parents are saying like, I want to stay home. We've seen a lot of divorced families where one parent has them that week and they don't want them to go to school because they're trying to be like fun parent that takes them around doing fun things during the day instead of going to school. And so like looking at really how we can help with the elementary, particularly in parents, how we can have parents see the value and the importance of students going to school. I've even thought like, can we reach out to businesses because they have the adults during the day and we have the kids to reiterate the importance of their kids going to school because I'm kind of what Dr. Bernstein said too. After COVID, we've seen this like school optional, going anywhere is optional. And so it's really impacted how we connect with students. We had one of our community schools the other day I was visiting, and they were talking about attendance and just the misconceptions that they've had on why kids aren't going to school until they really start talking to the families. And they had a student who hadn't been there for 5 months. And when they tried to get CYFD to help, and they finally went to the police to help, and the police found the student. And so they had them go back to school, to a different school, and they had been out of school for 5 months. And then they go to a different school and just randomly show up in the 3rd grade class. So there's like that disconnect, which is something on the school side that we can work on. But they had been out of school for 5 months and then they went to a different school. But I'm just like reiterating that we really need the help of the community in this because I really do believe our staff are working really hard to do the instruction part of the classroom, but without the kids being able to engage in that, we're seeing more and more gaps.
That was a lovely synopsis of why we should be
Why
doing
we're-
this. Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Blake.
I also, sometimes I think about, especially with young children can't get themselves to school, right?
Yeah.
It gets a little different as the kids get older. But I always wonder because of the situation so many parents and guardians are in, you know, did you not get to school because your one parent is working 2 jobs and, you know, has to figure out how to sleep at some point and so waking the kid up and getting them ready is on a layer of other burdens. Or, you know, is the teenager working so late at night in some kind of local business that they can't get themselves up? It's just that connection with the family and the understanding how we can connect with maybe our social workers and our counselors to figure out solutions.
Yeah, to the root causes. And what you
Right.
just described are root causes.
Which, do you have a slide showing those from the research? Cause I think we're talking about solutions, but we can't like gloss over the.
I don't, I think what I would say is that I will start asking our schools that had, so I will answer you, I'm gonna answer your question. I'm gonna get there in a little bit of a roundabout way.
Sure.
So the data that you're seeing right here in a line graph this is district-wide, so, and it's 3 years. So starting in 2022, the district-wide chronic absenteeism rate was 33.9, which as we saw is significantly higher. than the national average. And over 3 years, district-wide, it dropped down to 25.4. In non-community schools, they started at lower than district average, 29.4. All of our community schools are Title I schools. They start from a higher level of disengagement and less opportunity than non-community schools. So why we would see community schools starting at 41%, which is very high number in 2022, 2023 of chronic absenteeism. But what we see when you look at it this way, right, is community schools are able to close the gap and catch up to almost where the district started. So we're closing that gap over time. So if you go to the next slide, I just showing it to you in a little bit of a different way. So here's district-wide on the left, community schools and the reduction, and non-community schools. And when we look at it this way, we see that community schools did actually overall decrease at a higher percentage than the district average and then the non-community school. And so I do think, to your point now, Counselor Rogers, what they did is identified the root causes. The challenge is that the root causes are going to be specific to certain communities. They don't always look the same. And so depending on what that root cause was, and some of them are harder to solve than others, right? If a student is highly mobile and hasn't been in school for 5 months and has maybe been at 3 different schools, maybe that's a housing problem or an eviction problem, or
That's right.
right, like we don't know. And if they're working and they're coming to, they're tired, maybe we look at internet. Like those are hyper local solutions to hyper local problems, but that is what community schools excel at. So I think that I would love to, over the next couple of months, dig into what those root causes were for the schools that had those really high reductions. We had schools that had 20% reductions in chronic absenteeism through their efforts as community schools.
I think Councilor Rogers, to your request, I think this might be a really great agenda item to maybe keep live within our board meeting
Yeah.
over time.
We can keep looking.
I'll say we had a great experience at Lava Land recently, in which the school board was providing updates on the goals, guardrails, and so forth. And so we really had a robust discussion at that gathering, in which, to your point, Counselor, they were coming up with the root causes as well as some of
Right.
the solutions as well.
Yeah.
And so really maybe capturing those notes and maybe
Yeah.
providing that to this group might be helpful in terms of how we were simulating a council in that particular arena and how that works together. So thank you.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think that's a good suggestion. If you all would like that, we can continue to talk about the progress that community schools are making and the root causes they're addressing and who also is engaged.
Yeah, I think it's important, we can't talk about solutions without deeply talking about the root causes, and we know I think we all could name them, and we should name them.
Yeah.
Continue to name them: poverty, economic hardship, it's health issues for our students. It's a huge, working at UNM Hospital and seeing we had to have our own accredited school because there were so many kids who were sick and couldn't go to school regularly that we had to teach them in the hospital. Right? There's like APS doesn't do good with that. That's a huge one that we never talk about at APS, is children with chronic health issues and how horrible we are with their education and helping them be remote for those types of things or do things like that. COVID should have taught us that we could be more flexible, and we haven't been, especially for students that have health issues. And housing instability, we talked about a little bit, transportation issues, which is why the walking school bus is so important. Because we were finding around Wilson, parents had to go to school or go to work earlier than the kids. They get them up and then they get busy watching cartoons and would stay home and not because we're asking the questions of why. And if we're not talking about them and we're talking about solutions, I think we're gonna miss the boat.
Yeah, and that's where that data system and that tiered levels of support really come into play. Yeah, that's great. Well, that's everything that I had for you.
Thank you. Thank you for the robust discussion as well. We are going to transition into really kind of a remarkable and also expected in how a really strong community school council and a really talented community school coordinator, community school impact coordinator, work together with people who understand the data and understand how to weave the work together. So I'm gonna, is Brian?
Yep, Brian and Brett.
Yeah.
My name is Brian Lorenz. For those of you who are meeting for the first time, I'm the Director of School Accountability Support at APS. Our team, we support schools during the development, the implementation, and the monitoring of 90-day plans, which serve as the academic improvement plans for our district. Chloe, next slide, please. I've been in the role for just over a year and a half, since September of 2023. Previously, I was a special education teacher at James Monroe Middle School, teaching 7th grade math in the crosscat setting. My journey in public education, it looks a little bit different from the typical. Prior to that, I worked at the state level. It's what brought me to New Mexico back in 2018. I was the Director of Accountability at the Public Education Department. And I moved here from Alaska, where I served in a similar role for 5 years, working for the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development. Also, I don't have a bullet point for it, but I'm a proud member of the Governing Council for Mount Mahogany Community School. Michelle.
Hi, good morning. I'm Rochelle Ford. I've been the community school coordinator at Inez since 2015.
Wow.
I am originally from New York, so I have my Master's of Education in Initial and Inclusive Childhood Education from Robert Wesleyan. We moved out here in 2013 because of my stepchildren's family being out here, and we wanted to be together with them. And since I've been here, I've joined the Del Norte Rotary Club, which has been a really impactful membership for me because my dad and my granddad were also Rotarians. So it's nice to carry on that tradition. And we definitely consider Albuquerque our home now.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Chloe, next slide, please. For our very brief time together today, I'm going to give you the shortest overview of the 90-day plan that I've given in my role, because I want to make sure that we all at least have the same baseline information about what the 90-day plan is about. And then shifting quickly to the community school strategy and the intersection between the 90-day plan and the community school strategy. I've had the wonderful opportunity to visit a number of community school councils this school year, so I'll talk about that in my reflections. And at a recent huddle, I had the wonderful opportunity to facilitate a panel discussion of community school coordinators of those schools, those councils that I visited. And that was the emphasis for our visit here today. So my hope over the next 10-ish minutes is to set up Rochelle to talk about what has happened within the community school council at Inez since my visits. And then, of course, we'll open it up to any questions you might have about our work. Next slide. So the purpose of a 90-day plan is to identify, implement, monitor the changes in adult behavior to improve student outcomes for all of our students within a 90-day period through a process of continuous improvement. My work, it's very exciting because for those of you who watch APS board meetings and see the banner on the dais, many of the words that you see in the purpose of a 90-day plan, you see on the banner in front of the dais at the board meetings. Next slide. The 90-day plan, it does serve as the academic improvement plan for APS. Not just in APS, but every public school in New Mexico is required to develop 90-day plans. There are two, so it's a 90-day period. We've got the fall 90-day plan and the spring 90-day plan. However, this school year in particular, the work looks a little bit different depending on the school. And there are two variables in play. First, it depends on whether we're talking about an elementary, a middle, or a high school. Second, and more importantly, schools that have been identified as in need of support by the Public Education Department, schools that are MRI, more rigorous intervention, CSI, comprehensive support and improvement, those schools have expanded requirements within the 90-day plan framework. Next slide. When I have the opportunity to talk with folks within the community school space for the first time, I like talking about my journey with the community school strategy. I mentioned that I taught at James Monroe, which is not a community school. So my understanding of community schools was socks and food boxes. Coming into this particular role back in September of 2023, I had to quickly increase my understanding of the community school strategy. And among my reading and attendance at the regular community school coordinator huddles, this particular graphic is what resonated with me the most. And the reason for that is my thinking was more up here. The socks and food boxes are incredibly important. But thinking about the work that I lead at APS and ensuring that every school has a strong 90-day plan, academic improvement plan, that puts us right here in the community school logic model. And then ultimately, I share this goal. I want to make sure that when our students graduate with their diploma from APS, that they have the same opportunities that I have had, which I completely attribute to the education that I received. Next slide. We have the community school framework. Now that I have transitioned from a school-based role, an educator role, into the district office, I take very seriously my role as a support for schools. The most important thing that's happening within our schools happens in classrooms every day and literally right now as we're sitting here. So my work within the 90-day plan, it's the outermost blue circle, the supportive infrastructure. And the yellow stars are what I perceive as the intersections between my work with the 90-day plans and the community school strategy. Shared governance structures. Many times at our schools, the development, the implementation and the monitoring of 90-day plans, it occurs through the instructional council, which is a perfect example of shared governance within our schools. The second star, moving around clockwise, continuous improvement. I already mentioned that the 90-day plan process, it's all about continuous improvement, identifying something that we're going to do differently as the adults, and then determining if it had the desired impact on student outcomes. And if it didn't, that's okay. It's a matter of having that conversation about, well, why didn't that work? And then deciding, well, what are we going to try next to improve outcomes for all of our students? Data systems. Data makes up a significant part of 90-day plans, the data analysis, and looking at multiple data points and coming up with what's called the performance challenge. What do we need to address within the next 90 days to improve outcomes for our students? And then I heard the term root cause. Root cause analysis is a significant part of the 90-day plan process as well. And then ultimately deciding as a team, as a school-based team, what are we going to do differently to improve outcomes for our students? And then the final star, professional learning opportunities. That's one of the best parts of my job, being able to work with community school coordinators, go to schools and develop and implement professional learning. Because once again, now that I work at the district office, I am a support. I am in service to schools to make sure that they can focus on the learning that's happening within the classrooms. And I will do whatever I can to make sure that that is happening. Next slide. This school here has been very exciting. I started in September of 2023. That school year, I went to the huddles. I was a listener for the most part. And I'm very pleased and thankful for the opportunities provided by the ABC team to participate in the activities with community school coordinators and provide professional learning opportunities. Through that, I have been invited to 6 community school council meetings where those community school coordinators wanted me to come and talk about big picture, what is a 90-day plan? But then the way that I do that is through the school's specific plan and introducing the council to the work of the school. What are the goals in language arts and mathematics that the school is looking to accomplish? And then just planting that seed of a conversation. So then the council can take over and determine what can we do to support what the adults are doing differently in the building to improve outcomes. Next slide. I would like to acknowledge those 6 community school coordinators who provided me that opportunity. Anytime that I'm invited to a meeting such as this or to a community school council meeting, I take that very seriously. It's taking time on your agenda, and I thank you for that. And I just want to make sure that I'm publicly recognizing, including Rochelle, for providing an hour to talk to councils about school-specific 90-day plans. Next slide. My reflections. We have very diverse perspectives on our community school councils, and that is a very good thing in terms of the role groups, whether it's teachers, administrators, community members, students. And that's one of the things that I'm going to ask Rochelle to highlight, which is very exciting in hearing about the student involvement on the community school councils. With those diverse perspectives, people are starting at different places in terms of their understanding of even just what a 90-day plan is. Within the education world, you hear the term differentiation. And when we've got community members and teachers and principals and students, and I'm presenting to that entire group at the same time on 90-day plans, it definitely tested my differentiation skills. And definitely keeps in the back of my mind, how can we continue to involve students in this process and ensuring that student voice informs the development of these plans? These presentations that I've done, I mentioned that teachers make up a significant part of at least the 6 councils that I visited. And many of the teachers weren't on the team that developed the plan. That was really exciting for me because that was an opportunity for me to share to someone who wasn't involved in the process, just where their school's plan actually came from. Many thoughtful questions from participants. And then, like I said, I've been very interested in hearing about how community school coordinators have extended the conversation about 90-day plans since I visited. Next slide. I mentioned that professional learning, developing and sharing professional learning, it's a big part of my role. And it doesn't always need to be me. Through these visits and having that relationship with community school coordinators, we came up with this idea of facilitating a panel at the huddle back in March, where I would just provide some prompts to the community school coordinators that you saw on the previous slide, to have them in their own words talk about what the conversation has sounded like since my visit. Those 6 schools, if you looked at the schools where those community school coordinators are employed, it's a pretty diverse group of schools. It's a diverse group of community school coordinators as well, in many respects, including the amount of time that those folks have served in that role of community school coordinator. I prompted the coordinators during the panel with a mix of general and targeted questions. And that local context is important. I really believe that each of our schools represent unique school communities, even though we're all part of Albuquerque Public Schools. And also, we really had to be careful during the panel to communicate that Rochelle, for example, has been a community school coordinator for 10 years. And there were people in the room who had just started their role as a community school coordinator, and really making sure that we communicated that you're not going to be where Rochelle and Inez is overnight. And that's why it was really important to have a diverse group of coordinators in that panel. So at this point, I'm still calling it an abbreviated version of the panel, but we have a very important community school coordinator, Rochelle. And what we wanted to do for our remaining time, we have just a sampling of some of the prompts that I provided during the panel that we did for the community school huddle. And at this point, I'm just going to provide the prompts, and hopefully I gave enough background on the 90-day plan, and I'm going to turn this over to Rochelle. So Rochelle, your first prompt is, how has the 90-day plan informed community school council conversations since my visits?
Well, I have to say too, I was chuckling to myself just briefly when Brian said that he was graciously invited to our school to present to the council, because from my perspective, it was more like, you're coming to our school, when are you available? More of a directive. Yeah. So that was a good memory. I think to answer this prompt, for us, it rounded out some conversations that we've already been having. Just as a little bit of background, we are a well-established community school. We're a well-established community school council. We have a principal that's deeply invested in the success of our school and builds relationships with all of our partners, not the least of which is our council. So we kind of already had a cadence, a comfortable cadence of conversation among ourselves, so that we were able to dive deeper into some of these questions that were proposed. And I do think it rounded out these conversations that we were having. I think we kind of had vague sense in the back of our minds that we were moving toward a next step. And so after conversations with Brian, we were really able to frame our next move. And we wrote it down, it's in our notes. What we decided is that we need to focus on what ways can we elevate supports so that our students achieve a high level of academic success, plus have community connected experiences so that our students have the luxury of choice and self-confidence as they grow and enter into their adulthood. So that's what we established as like our driving force for the upcoming years. I think from Brian's presence at our council too, like this is information that we've had from our principal, from Brian Garcia, from just sort of information that's been presented to the council, but just from our school level. So having a different voice say the same things we've been having really impacted. It fell different on their ears as like new information. And I think that like just Brian's personality and his leadership style and his conversation style just really guided our conversations in a different way that we've ever done before and allowed us to think of the next steps. I do think too, clarifying that a term like a 90-day plan really, and going deep into the purpose behind it and the outcomes that we're hoping for really kind of solidified with our council members that this isn't just busy work or like check a couple boxes off and stick it in a drawer and forget about it. Like it's an intentional, purposeful, forward-moving document and a fluid way of looking at how we're going to meet our goals. And then one of the last things we did during Brian's presentation was come up with what our next steps were. We wrote it down on some note cards and I've kept them. And so just a couple of quotes from our council members were to figure out ways to best support both teachers and students in academic and non-academic ways throughout each 90-day plan cycle. And this one I like a lot too. Since the goals are focused on teachers' processes, perhaps the next step for the council is to talk about strategies and partnerships to help meet teachers' needs and ensure that they feel supported. We usually bring community school in to meet student needs, but staff needs are key to these instruction-focused goals.
And I didn't realize Rochelle's gonna bring the cards.
Yes.
I'm thrilled. When I do this professional learning for community school councils, the last activity, the exit ticket that I do, I hand out the index cards. And my prompt is something like, following today's presentation, what's your next step as a community school council member? I collect the cards, I don't look at them, I immediately hand them to the community school coordinator. So I'm thrilled by those responses that you received. All right, next. This is the second of 3 prompts. Rochelle, what successes and lessons learned have you or the community school council had since the presentation on the school's 90-day plan?
Right. I think the biggest lesson for me and our principal and our community school council was to really see the supportive structure upon which the school is built. It was kind of looking at like the blueprints or looking at the support structures. It was a shift in how we look at things. Anecdotally, one of my community school council members happens to be the spouse of a public school teacher. And she said, does every school have a 90-day plan? This is the first I'm hearing of it. And she's been married to him for a long time. And so she said, we're gonna have deeper conversations around my house now that I know that 90-day plans are in every school. So I thought that was like a personal connection that she made that is going to help her in the future. I think in some ways, this conversation, this training from Brian, well, I have 3 notes written down. I think first of all, it gave our community school council members maybe like the permission or the bravery to pursue systemic change. I think that our community school council members now see themselves as thought leaders for our schools, where we're aligning data and experiences and root causes into a bigger picture about where our school is and where we need to be. And not to be overly sentimental, but I think it really validated how they feel about themselves as community partners and amplified the impact that they individually and collectively have on our school and creating a safe school and a safe neighborhood for our students. We always talk about inviting people to the table, but I think this is a shift in their thought too, because now we're bringing the table to our students and to our staff and to our community. And so I really feel like it solidified what their role is and how they feel about themselves. Because like you were saying, Brian, like we have definitely moved from a place where we're providing services and now really looking at the impact and the reason behind why we're providing these services. And I think we're in a really good place, really well positioned to continue to make systemic change instead of just providing plain services with no background as to why, or no expectations as to what can happen because of that.
So I'm so sorry to interrupt
That's okay.
you. We are at time. We started a little late, so I don't know if you want to ask the board for if we need to close or if we
Okay,
can.
for a few minutes
we
over.
were-
If you need to leave, because I know people are back to back, feel free to.
So then, if you do have to go, I do want to just let you know there is, oh, well, you're fine. You're sitting, never mind.
Does anybody need my?
Oh, yes.
Thank you all
Thank you so much, Counselor Hassan.
So I just have a quick question. Thank you for saying that each school has a 90-day plan. Is there a 90-day plan for the whole district that they roll up into?
Great question. 90-day plans are school specific. However, we do refer to them, even though it's a PED product, every public school in New Mexico does a 90-day plan. Part of my messaging is that these are APS 90-day plans. And what I mean by that is we want to make sure, say, the board's strategic plan, the goals and the guardrails, and asking leadership, well, what exactly do we want to see in our plans to make sure that, yes, we're making changes in adult behavior that are going to improve student outcomes, but we want to do it in alignment with the direction that the district is moving. So there isn't a district-wide plan, but district initiatives are infused in the plans.
Got it. The next question. I love that it focuses on adult behaviors, but a lot of what you talked about was student, like, I know we're trying to improve the students, but what specific adult behaviors are those specific to the schools too? What behaviors that
Exactly.
drive student success that adults
Yes,
are doing?
this is where we would have benefited from a slightly longer 90-day plan presentation.
Got it.
Where, I guess the short answer to your question would be, I mentioned that the school is looking at their school-specific data. They're identifying the performance challenge. What's the one thing that they have to have a sense of urgency about addressing within the 90-day period?
Tied to the adults,
No, it's performance data.
not of the adults.
Can I just jump in?
Oh, yeah.
Real quick on that 90-day plan question. So the state has been requiring 90-day plans for every school for some time. I think the importance of the work when it comes to community schools is in without a lot of thought or guidance or time and support, it turns into an analysis of standardized test scores, which is not helpful.
No.
Not at all, because we know how limited that data is to any kind of real information we need about our students. So hopefully with this work around community schools, you do look at root causes and you do look at what it is about our school that supports a sense of belonging, where we have a positive culture, where what do we really want to have happen at our school in a holistic way? So we're looking at the whole child and their family, and we're not just looking at this tiny little piece of test score data.
Yeah.
And so
I think my point is, I want to see what we're talking about when it comes to the adult behavior. We focus a lot on the kids' behavior, but I want to see how are we honing in on the adults' behavior that drives student success. And that care of that belonging, especially for students of color, is driven by the teachers and the administration at that school. And so I know we're late, I don't want to belabor the point, but I would like to see, because I just looked for my schools in my district,
Mhm.
90-day plan, not online.
Oh, we can send it to you.
Well, they should be available publicly online, which is, makes sense why even the teachers don't even know about them. They need to be online. I would like to see them for my schools, because for me, I was excited when I saw focusing on the adult behavior necessary to improve student outcomes. And the relationships we're talking about, the belonging, highly driven by adult behaviors. And then I don't hear a lot about what behaviors for the adults that we're focusing on. And that, I know we don't have time today, but I really love to read some of these from my
So
district.
it's on the PED website.
Right, but.
Yeah,
but
but each
again, if I
school should
Google-
have,
No,
yeah.
but if I Google, all I did was Google Wilson Middle School 90-day plan, Albuquerque Public Schools, and I put PED in there.
Nothing, okay.
So now I would like it to be public.
So much.
I wanna make sure that I give
I'm always the one bringing.
No,
it
I
up.
wanna make sure that I give Rochelle the opportunity to talk about the students that I met at the community school council meeting. It is important to realize that when a school does a data analysis, it goes way beyond standardized assessment results.
Oh, that's good.
For example, we required all schools, as a team, we required all schools to include their skills, habits, and mindset student survey data as a data point within their data analysis.
But I love data and I'm a data geek. You're not gonna get to behaviors through data.
It could be that the websites aren't pixelated to have that content. So the data isn't like,
No,
You know, you know what I'm
that's
saying?
nice, but no,
yeah,
I don't play when it comes to kids and behavior and adult behavior, especially for Black kids.
Yeah, no,
Adult
I'm just-
behavior is a big deal, and I
Yeah.
think we need to be more real about it in these meetings and have those, like, I want to see some actual plans.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Rogers.
Thank you, Counselor.
To conclude, one of the big takeaways for me when I went to Inez, most of these council meetings had students present. Inez had two fifth grade young men in particular who are superstar students. I mentioned that when I present on the 90-day plan, I use the school's actual plan and I give a handout and we work through the handout. One of the pages has the school's goals. What percentage of students were proficient on statewide assessments last year and what's the school's goal? And I pause and just, typical teacher strategy. What do you notice? What do you wonder? The two young men, their hands went up immediately, which was very exciting to see. The comments from these two fifth graders were so insightful. One of the young men asked, so Inez wanted to improve 10 percentage points on statewide assessments. His question was, well, I wonder if 10 percentage points is too high, maybe something a little bit lower would be something more realistic. It's like, wow, that is quite insightful. And then went to the second student who had his hand up. He expressed concern, so it's the percentage of students who were proficient on statewide assessments, which means the inverse is there's a higher percentage of students who were not proficient. And he made that connection and expressed almost concern about the students at Inez who were not among the percentage of students who were proficient in statewide assessments. And these students.
And I think he even mapped it out, like
Yes.
it's like 220 students are not proficient, like it was a light bulb moment for him. for
Yes.
sure. So.
And I wanted to open it up to the rest of the group, but I was honest with the group. I said, okay, these two students have set the bar pretty high in terms of the questions regarding this part of the presentation. And I realized very quickly, these two students just didn't come out of a box. They didn't come from anywhere. Something had happened at Inez to produce these two students on the verge of transitioning to middle school. So the prompt, we don't have the slides anymore, but that's okay. The prompt for Rochelle is, how did you get these two students to a point where they could look at something with fresh eyes, never having seen a 90-day plan before, and to contribute in a meaningful way in a room full of adults about the 90-day plan?
I think this is something that we, without knowing in the past how important it would be now in the future, have been laying a foundation for student engagement and student voice to be heard. Like Barbara said, we've been cultivating a culture of safety and care for years now at our school. And specifically to the point of student voice, over the years, we've had students on our community school council since 2019. Students have voted on things like One School, One Club, what Genius Hour clubs are even being offered, like not just what they get to pick to do, but what is offered for them to pick from. Students select their own career day workshops. So there's a lot of different ways that students have already been able to submit their voice and to have their voice be heard on like a smaller capacity. But they know and have experienced that we are dedicated, we are present, we are building relationships with them, we're consistent, we're reliable as leaders. And so the principal and I, over the past years, have really worked to establish relationships with the students so that they feel comfortable with us and know that we take action on what they have to say. And I'm hoping most of you in the room have heard of the new initiative this year for principal advisory councils to be at every school. And so our principal advisory council is myself and the principal and fourth and fifth graders. And these just happen to be like really stellar kids who have a clear vision for what they want their school to be, even if they're aging out and thinking about the future. They feel confident that changes will be made on behalf of their friends in years to come, even if they're away from the school. And I think that they're just really coming from a hopeful and energetic point of view. They're very observant, they have very good feedback, and we've even asked them to provide their voice for things like budgetary decisions that we made. We recently, based on student voice, shifted a program that we have had in our school during the school day for 20 years. And they are not finding it as impactful and innovative as it once was 20 years ago when it was first started. And so we've shifted away from funding that program and are now focusing on a more tech kind of environment for the students to participate in, because they talked about how important that's going to be in their future. So I think we just value that they love their school. We know it's their school and we want to hear their voice so that we can make decisions for them. I think a lot of times students maybe get overlooked. I think a lot of times adults make decisions based on what they think kids are going to say. But this year we've really doubled down on listening to student voice and making sure that we're responding to it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us the opportunity
Thank
to
you.
talk to you today, for hanging around for, I know we went a little bit over. I wanted to make sure that we're elevating the work, the very exciting work happening at Inez.
This is exciting.
And this is just an example of one school, one community school in our district. So thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner, sorry. I forgot.
I'd just like to, just make one counterpoint to Councilor Rogers, who I don't know. I met her once in an elevator. She seemed very nice, and I'd like to have further discussions with her about her, perspective, because I appreciate people who are passionate and also people who think differently than I. But I do have a different view. For what it's worth, I'm not an educator. But I do believe it should be more student-centered. I happen to have watched and listened to the speaker yesterday at the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce luncheon, the Mississippi Marathon, as she called it. And as she pointed out, we have the kids for 8 hours. And we can do a lot with kids during that period of time, if we really maximize our energy and hold people accountable. And like Councilor Rogers, I grew up in a disadvantaged situation in the South Valley, where I still live. And I have made a point to Deanna and others that I understand very well my community and the people that live in my community, and I've seen some amazing success stories. Amazing success stories I've shared with the deans just a minute ago, and people have done so incredibly well. I mean, I didn't even start because I started bragging about all my friends. So I just believe on, that the focus should be more on the students and what we do with them within the power of the time that we have with them. Because we can't solve all the world's problems. We can't solve all the issues that they're facing in the community or their parents face. And some of them are unsolvable. I will tell you, there are some problems that people face in their houses that are unsolvable. But I really look forward to, I'm gonna reach out to Counselor Rogers because I see a passion and it's a valid, perspective. It's a different perspective, but it's valid, and I just think that type of discussion is really important, and it doesn't have to be that we all agree. But, you know, it's valid, but I do think there's a perspective, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so, not in relation to just the 90-day plan, but in reflecting the gestalt of the meeting, I have a request. Because I think most folks know that, last week there was the Yazzie Martinez hearing, and, a very strong decision where the state had a hammer. And, you know, I think this is a critical opportunity potentially for this group to help shape state policy in the future. So my request would be, could this group reach out to the PED secretary to offer support as they develop what that strategic plan might look like, which is due in July. And so there's not a lot of time to get to the next meeting, because I've reached out to her recently. I personally think that the training standards need to change for future educators. I think our educators are wonderful, and what they do is wonderful, but I think reorienting our standards around the 4 protected groups would be really important. And, you know, I think there could be a mix of those other things. And she seemed open to some of the ideas I've sent her relative to that. But I think about the larger base of their comprehensive plan. What learning have we had here? Could that in ways influence what that moves forward? Because in the 10 years since that suit's happened, I think that agencies struggled to really find what to hold on to. And so I think it's going to be community voices to really support them to think about what could hold. And so, you know, any communication in the next month and a half might be really important to really influence that plan for the future, which might be a balance of the different perspectives. I think we, you know, both in terms of what adults can do as well as how we serve the needs of students.
I think we can also put that on the Community School Coalition agenda in the next couple of weeks if we haven't sent them. I know we might have missed our deadline again, I don't know, but we work really closely as the New Mexico Coalition for Community Schools, and in particular Brian Garcia, with both the secretary and the deputy secretary that oversees community schools. And I think as you were speaking, what might be interesting is how do we combine those two, and how do we intersect their commitment to community schools with their strategic plan? Because I do think they definitely struggle just in turnover, in thinking through like how each thing that they're having to be accountable to interacts and can be integrated with one another to have an actual comprehensive strategy to education. But I do think Brian has deep connections there.
And I thank you, Madam Chair, and listening to the commissioner and to the dean, just really seeing how this board, this body can really add influence to that in terms of the deep connections that I personally may have, but the power that rests on this board that can really influence that, I think is really, really paramount. And I wanted to mention in reference to the work that you all just saw, I want to recognize, you know, Deanna, and saying you were correct. Dr. Blakey sent me a link and said that all 90-day plans are publicly accessible on the NMPDD website. And so we'll work to make sure there's a link on that front. But I think the only way we can make this kind of work happen and bring this into coherence is through what you're recommending. So thank you.
Yeah. Just real quickly, and I'll try to not, sometimes I go off the rails. So when we talk about instruction, what happens in the classroom, student-centered and talking about what's at the core of what students need is absolutely what should be in the lead. And so talking about students and their progress and development is absolutely core. What I think Counselor Rogers is getting at is, what do we do that impacts that? I have a slight, just having been in the classroom and knowing the way things interact, lots of times, and it's very easy for policymakers and people outside of education to look and see that as an individual teacher. So when we start talking about adult behavior, it comes back to pointing the finger at individual teachers rather than looking at the system that they work inside of. And so I have grave problems with 90-day plans for this very reason. It sets up things on a short-term basis. And when you set things up, I mean, I heard you refer to Mississippi and everyone's talking about the Mississippi miracle. Well, I've looked at Mississippi data. That progress drops off by 8th grade, and New Mexico has always been ahead of Mississippi when it comes to the social studies, social science, and science performance of students. We've always been ahead of them. Now they've made some gains because they focused on sort of that short-term 90-day plan. They've given their kids lots of structured literacy. But you look at what the root cause is, and you look at what children need long-term to be successful. And what children need long-term to be successful is language, connection, experience, background knowledge. And so what's happening in these states that have these great data points, they show wonderful progress short-term because they have skilled and drilled and done all of these things that make kids short-term look good on those tests. But long-term, it doesn't develop a passion for learning. It doesn't develop their background knowledge. It doesn't develop an appreciation of their own culture and language. And I think that's what the core of what Counselor Rogers is talking about is if we don't tap into that passion for them as human beings of value who need to take the skills of structured literacy and all that stuff, because that gives them the tools they need to be successful, but it sure doesn't give them the passion and that vision of what they're capable of. And so as an institution, we need to figure out how to make sure structurally, institutionally, system-wise, how do we do that? And that's what that focus on children is. The focus on, and it's why I think any 90-day plan that isn't incorporating the framework of community schools is going to fail. We can pour lots of money into it. We can make it look good, and it's going to fail long term because it doesn't hit that core need of human beings to engage with their community, to engage with themselves as who they are. And so 90-day plans as a school, it helps say, okay, this time we're really going to focus on making this little part of our program work. And I'm not saying no to 90-day plans. I'm saying if that's your whole framework for progress, you will miss the boat. And that's why the engagement of ABC is so critical. And just one final thing, the initial discussion about the Learning Institute and I'm sitting here thinking, you know, it's taken 20 years of development of setting up this framework of ABC, of figuring out the system and the structure and how all of those pieces going together, building the commitment. And all of a sudden there was a new quality to that. There was something in that level of interaction that could not have existed without the previous 20 years, but is so different because it incorporates every level. It's not just up here and it's not just the administrative here. It's like there's from top to bottom, integrating all of that knowledge. And we don't give schools the opportunity to do that kind of longevity. 5-year grant, it's gone, you're done for. And that, I mean, it undermines every bit of instructional progress that we make for kids. That's my rant.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
That was a great rant.
And thank you all. We will, we're in May, right? So June, what's the next?
June 12th.
I don't know where I'm at time these days. And
Does anybody else need a parking thing?
You know how to, you need this.
I walk.
Oh, you walk,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. Well, that's great. Is
Yeah.
your office?
No, I have a client's, right on the street.